Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The clink of ice in Tom's whiskey glass had become a kind of soundtrack to our Friday nights. Usually, it was a comforting sound, a signal that the week was done, and we could unwind. But that particular evening, the clinking grated on my nerves. It was too frequent, too enthusiastic. Tom, my husband of 27 years, was getting loud, his laughter booming through our den as he and his best friend, Mark, huddled over a game of poker. I'm Sarah, by the way, to most nights. I enjoyed their camaraderie. Mark was a good man, steady and kind, a stark contrast to Tom's often boisterous nature, especially when he'd had a few. I was curled up on the old leather armchair, the one possessed to Tom's grandfather, pretending to read a novel, but mostly I was watching them. The air in the den was thick with the smell of old books, a hint of Tom's cigars from earlier, a habit I tolerated but never loved, and the faint, sweet aroma of the bourbon they were drinking. A low lamp cast long shadows, making the familiar room feel a little more mysterious, a little more charged. Read 'em and weep, old buddy. Tom crowed, slamming his cards down. He'd been winning, and his confidence was ballooning with every sip. Mark just smiled, a slow, easy smile that never quite reached his eyes when Tom got like this. Mark was a thoughtful player, quiet and observant. He wasn't a heavy drinker, nursing one glass for every 3 of Tom's. I must have drifted off for a bit, lulled by the murmur of their voices and the warmth of the room. When I blinked my eyes open, the atmosphere had shifted. The pile of chips in front of Tom had dwindled significantly, and his face was flushed, not with triumph anymore, but with a stubborn, slightly desperate look. Mark's stack, on the other hand, had grown impressively. "One more hand, Marky," Tom slurred, his voice thick. "Double or nothing. 4, for everything." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Tom, are you sure? That's a big pile you're pointing at. Maybe we should call it a night." "Nonsense," Tom declared, puffing out his chest. "I'm feeling lucky. One more. But let's make this interesting. Really interesting." He glanced over at me, a strange glint in his eye that I didn't like, not one bit. My stomach gave a little lurch. "What do you mean, Tom?" Mark asked, his voice still calm, but I could see a flicker of concern in his gaze as he followed Tom's to me. Tom leaned forward, conspiratorially, though his voice was still too loud. "If I lose this hand, Mark, you win. A companion for that charity auction dinner you were complaining about having to attend alone next Saturday. Sarah will go with you." My book slipped from my lap and hit the carpet with a soft thud. I stared at Tom, my mouth agape. Was he serious? He was wagering *me*, my presence? Like I was a prize, a trinket to be passed around? The room suddenly felt cold. The laughter lines around Tom's eyes, which I usually found endearing, now seemed to mock me. Mark looked from Tom to me, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then a faint frown creased his forehead. "Tom, that's not funny. Sarah's not part of the pot. Let's just play for the chips or call it a night." He sounded genuinely uncomfortable, and a small, traitorous part of me felt a rush of gratitude towards him. But Tom was beyond reasoning, lost in the bravado of the moment and too much bourbon. Why not? She loves those fancy dinners. And you need a date, right? It's perfect. He grinned at me, a sloppy, self-satisfied grin. "What do you say, honey? Spice things up a bit?" Before I could utter a word, before I could voice the fury and humiliation bubbling up inside me, Mark spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Tom, I don't think Sarah appreciates being volunteered like that. And frankly, I'm not comfortable with it. Oh, don't be such a spoilsport, Mark. Tom waved a dismissive hand. She'll have a good time. Right, Sarah? He looked at me, expecting me to play along, to smooth things over like I always did when he overstepped. I felt pinned by their gazes. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to scream at Tom, to tell him how incredibly disrespectful and idiotic he was being. Another part, the weary, accustomed part, just wanted the evening to end. But then there was Mark. His quiet defense of me, his discomfort, it struck a chord. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't treating it like a joke. I found my voice, though it was shakier than I would have liked. Tom, you're being ridiculous. Am I? He chuckled, then turned back to Mark. So, cards on the table. Is it a deal or not? Mark looked at me again, a long, searching look. It wasn't pitying or lecherous or anything untoward. It was questioning, as if he was trying to gauge what I truly felt, what I wanted. And in that moment, a strange thought flickered through my mind. What if I said yes? Not to appease Tom, not because I felt like property, but for another reason entirely. Maybe it was the sheer audacity of Tom's wager, or maybe it was the unexpected feeling of being seen by Mark, truly seen, in a way Tom hadn't looked at me in years. A reckless impulse, so unlike my usual cautious self, rose within me. Perhaps it was time Tom faced some consequences for his casual disregard. Perhaps it was time I stepped out of the comfortable, predictable rhythm of my life, even just for one evening. I took a slow breath. All right, Tom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady now. If you're so confident. I looked directly at Mark. And Mark, if you win, I'd be interested to hear about this charity dinner. I deliberately didn't say I'd be happy or that it was a wonderful idea. Just interested. Tom whooped, oblivious to the undercurrents in my tone or the subtle shift in the room's dynamics. That's my girl. Knew you were game. Mark didn't whoop. He held my gaze for another moment, a complex emotion swirling in his eyes, surprise, perhaps a touch of concern, and something else I couldn't quite name. Then he nodded slowly. All right, Tom. One hand. For your remaining chips. And Sarah's company at the dinner, if she's truly amenable when the bourbon haze clears. He added that last part looking at me, a silent acknowledgement of the situation. The cards were dealt. The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by the snap of cards and Tom's heavy breathing. I didn't watch the game. I watched Mark. He was calm, his face betraying nothing. Tom, however, was a mess of nervous energy, tapping his fingers, shifting in his seat. It was over quickly. Tom's shoulders slumped. No, he whispered, staring at the cards on the table. He'd lost spectacularly. He looked up, his eyes bleary, finding mine. There was a flicker of realization, maybe even regret, dawning through the alcohol. Sarah, Before he could finish, Mark spoke, his voice gentle but clear. Well, Tom, it seems the cards weren't with you tonight. He then turned to me, his expression softening. Sarah, he said, and the way he said my name, just my name, held a respect Tom's boisterous pronouncements had utterly lacked. About that dinner. It's next Saturday. It's for the Children's Literacy Fund. No pressure at all. If you'd rather not, I completely understand. This was Tom's foolishness, not yours. His words were like a balm. He was giving me an out, a graceful way to decline, to erase the crassness of Tom's bet. And I appreciated it, more than he knew. I looked at Tom, slumped in his chair, looking small and foolish. A familiar wave of exasperation mixed with a tired affection washed over me. Then I looked back at Mark, at his steady gaze, his considerate offer, and the reckless impulse from earlier solidified into a decision. "Actually, Mark," I said, a small smile playing on my lips, "I think I'd like that. It sounds like a worthy cause. And maybe, just maybe, it would be a night where I felt like more than just a fixture in someone else's game." The air in our den, usually so comfortably familiar, suddenly felt charged with a different kind of energy. It wasn't the boisterous, alcohol-fueled energy of Tom's poker nights, but something quieter, more subtle, and infinitely more intriguing. Tom was staring at me, his mouth slightly open, a bewildered expression on his face. He looked like a little boy who'd broken a toy and was only just realizing he couldn't put it back together. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Mark, however, offered a small, genuine smile. "That's great, Sarah. I'll call you midweek with the details, if that's okay." "That would be fine," I replied, feeling a surprising sense of calm, even a sliver of anticipation. It was absurd. My husband had, in a drunken stupor, effectively lost me in a card game, and here I was, agreeing to go on a date with his best friend. But the way Mark handled it, the respect he showed, made all the difference. It wasn't about being won or lost. It was about an invitation freely offered and freely accepted, despite the ridiculous circumstances of its origin. Tom finally found his voice, a low grumble. "Well, isn't this cozy? Did I miss something? Are you too?" He trailed off, unable to articulate the suspicion dawning in his foggy brain. "Don't be an idiot, Tom," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You made a fool of yourself and put your friend in an awkward position. Mark was kind enough to make the best of it." I stood up, feeling a sudden need to escape the heavy atmosphere of the den. "I'm going to bed. You two can clean up this mess." I didn't wait for a reply. As I walked out, I could feel both their eyes on me. I didn't look back. Upstairs, in the quiet of our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind replaying the evening's events. Tom's carelessness, his assumption that I was just an extension of his will, stung more than I lay on. It wasn't new, this casual disregard, but tonight it had been so blatant, so public, at least in front of Mark. And Mark. He'd always been a quiet presence in our lives, Tom's loyal friend. I'd always liked him, found him to be a decent, thoughtful man. But tonight, I'd seen a different side of him, or perhaps I'd just seen him more clearly. His quiet strength, his refusal to participate in Tom's disrespectful tirade, his gentle deference to me. It was refreshing. I thought about the charity dinner. It was the kind of event Tom usually complained about having to attend for work, the kind of event I often ended up going to with him, making polite conversation while he networked or got progressively merrier at the open bar. Going with Mark would be different. I found myself wondering what it would be like to be with a man who actually seemed to want my company, not just assume it. A little thrill, mixed with a healthy dose of apprehension, ran through me. This wasn't about revenge against Tom, not really. It was about something for me. A chance to step outside the predictable script of my life, if only for one night. A chance to feel appreciated, perhaps even a little cherished. Was that too much to ask after all these years? Tom stumbled into the bedroom much later, smelling of stale whiskey and remorse. He mumbled a series of apologies, his words slurring together. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I was an ass. A complete idiot. Didn't mean it. You know I love you." I lay in bed, facing away from him, pretending to be asleep. His apologies felt hollow, a rehearsed litany I'd heard variations of countless times before after he had too much to drink or said something thoughtless. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but underneath it, something else was stirring, a sense of resolve. The next few days were interesting. Tom was a model of contrition. He made coffee every morning, complimented my cooking, even when it was just leftovers, and kept trying to engage me in conversations about our future, our plans, anything to get back into my good graces. It was a familiar dance, but this time I wasn't as quick to forgive, to smooth things over. The memory of that card game, of being a bargaining chip, was too fresh. Mark called on Wednesday evening, just as he said he would. His voice was warm and respectful over the phone. "Sarah, it's Mark. About Saturday. Are you still?" "Yes, Mark, I am," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I'm looking forward to it." "Good," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "It's at the Grand Ballroom downtown. Starts around 7. Black tie optional, but most people dress up a bit. I can pick you up around 6:30. "That sounds perfect," I replied. We chatted for a few more minutes about the charity, about a book he was reading. It was easy, comfortable. There were no awkward silences, no forced pleasantries. It felt normal. More normal than many of my recent conversations with Tom. When I hung up, Tom was watching me, his expression a mixture of anxiety and something else I couldn't quite decipher. "So you're really going?" "Yes, Tom. I said I would." "With Mark?" "Yes, with Mark, the friend you wagered my company to." I didn't say it unkindly, just stated it as a fact. He winced. "Look, Sarah, about that. I've been doing a lot of thinking." "Have you?" I asked, meeting his gaze. "Good. Maybe it's time we both did some thinking." Saturday arrived cloaked in a crisp autumn air. I found myself taking extra care getting ready. I chose a deep emerald green dress, one I hadn't worn in years. It was elegant, understated, but it made me feel good. I styled my hair, put on a little more makeup than usual. It wasn't for Mark, not specifically. It was for me. It felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself I'd let fade. When the doorbell rang at precisely 6:30, I took one last look in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different. There was a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Mark was standing on the porch, looking incredibly handsome in a well-tailored dark suit and a silver tie. He held a small, delicate corsage of white orchids. "Sarah," he said, his eyes appreciative, "you look beautiful." "Thank you, Mark," I replied, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "You look very dapper yourself." Tom hovered in the background, looking uncomfortable and out of place. He mumbled a "have a good time" as we left, his voice lacking its usual bluster. The drive downtown was filled with easy conversation. Mark talked about his work as an architect, his passion for designing spaces that were both functional and beautiful. He asked me about my interests, my old job at the library before I dedicated myself to raising our kids, and he listened, really listened, when I spoke. It was a novelty. Tom was often too wrapped up in his own stories, his own world, to truly hear me. The grand ballroom was stunning, dripping with chandeliers and filled with elegantly dressed people. It was the kind of place that could be intimidating, but with Mark by my side, I felt surprisingly at ease. He introduced me to a few of his colleagues, his friends, and I found myself chatting and laughing more easily than I had in ages. He was attentive without being overbearing, always making sure I had a drink or drawing me into conversations. During a lull in the chatter at our table, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Sarah," he began, his voice low, "I want to apologize again for Tom's behavior the other night. It was out of line, and I hope this evening isn't tainted by that." I met his gaze, his sincere brown eyes. "Mark, you have nothing to apologize for. You handled it with grace." And honestly, I gave a small, wry smile. If it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here, enjoying this lovely evening and this excellent company. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, in that case, perhaps I should thank Tom's terrible poker skills. We both laughed, a shared, genuine laugh that felt good, that felt right. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream. We danced. He was a surprisingly good dancer, and we talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. We discovered a shared love for old movies, for quiet Sunday mornings with a good book, for walks in nature. It was like uncovering hidden layers of a person I thought I knew, and in doing so, uncovering forgotten parts of myself. There was a connection there, an easy rapport that I hadn't anticipated, but that felt incredibly natural. As he drove me home, a comfortable silence settled between us. The city lights blurred past, painting streaks of color in the darkness. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long, long time. It wasn't just about having a nice evening out. It was about feeling seen, feeling valued, feeling like Sarah. Not Tom's wife, not the mother of our grown children, but just Sarah. When he pulled up to my house, he cut the engine and turned to me. "Thank you, Sarah," he said softly, "for coming tonight. And for being you." "Thank you, Mark," I replied, my voice equally soft. "It was wonderful. I haven't felt this alive in a long time." There was a moment, a fleeting, charged moment, where our eyes met and held. A different kind of question hung in the air, unspoken. What was this? Where could it possibly go? He was Tom's best friend. I was Tom's wife. The complexities were immense. He leaned in just a fraction, and I thought he might kiss me. My heart gave a little flutter. But then he hesitated, a flicker of something. Caution? Respect? In his eyes. He pulled back slightly, his hand reaching for the door handle on his side. "I should let you go." Yes, I agreed, though a part of me didn't want the evening to end. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Good night, Mark." "Good night, Sarah." I walked up the path to my front door, feeling his gaze on me until I stepped inside. The house was dark and quiet. Tom was likely asleep, probably passed out on the sofa again, if he'd waited up and then given in to more drink. As I stood in the silent hallway, the scent of orchids from my corsage filling the air, I knew one thing for sure. Something had shifted, not just between me and Mark, but within me. The unexpected wager, Tom's drunken folly, had opened a door I hadn't even realized was closed, and I wasn't sure I wanted to shut it again. The night had been about far more than just a charity dinner. It had been about rediscovering a part of myself I thought I had lost, or perhaps I'd never fully allowed to bloom. The reflection in the hallway mirror showed a woman with a thoughtful smile, a woman on the cusp of something. And for the first time in a very long time, I was genuinely curious to see what tomorrow would bring. The week after the charity dinner was different. Tom continued his campaign of attentiveness, but it felt strained, like he was walking on eggshells. He kept asking if I was okay, if we were okay, his eyes filled with a nervous uncertainty I hadn't seen in him before. And I couldn't give him the easy reassurance he craved. because I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. I found myself replaying moments from the evening with Mark, the easy flow of our conversation, the way he listened, the shared laughter. It wasn't about romance, not in the heady, heart-pounding way of new love. It was something quieter, deeper, a sense of recognition, of being understood. It highlighted, in stark relief, the silences and misunderstandings that had crept into my marriage with Tom over the years, unnoticed until they had become a vast, quiet gulf. Mark didn't call. I didn't expect him to, not right away. The situation was delicate, a tangle of loyalties and unspoken rules. He was Tom's best friend, after all. But I thought about him. I wondered if he was thinking about me, too. The following Saturday, Tom suggested we go out for dinner, just the two of us, to our old favorite Italian place. It was an olive branch, a clear attempt to reconnect, to recapture something we'd lost. I agreed, partly because I knew I couldn't avoid these conversations forever, and partly because I needed to understand my own feelings. The restaurant was filled with the familiar aroma of garlic and oregano, the cheerful chatter of other diners. But even in that warm, inviting atmosphere, there was a tension between us. Tom tried. He really did. He asked about my week, complimented my new sweater, talked about a potential promotion at work. But his efforts felt like he was following a script, ticking off boxes on a how to please your wife checklist. "Sarah," he said, after the waiter had cleared our main courses, his voice earnest. "About that poker night? And Mark, I know I messed up. Big time. I've been doing a lot of soul-searching this week. I realized I've been taking you for granted, taking us for granted." I looked at him, at the man I had loved for most of my adult life, the father of my children. There were lines of worry etched around his eyes that hadn't been there a few weeks ago. "You did, Tom," I said quietly. "You made me feel like an object, something to be wagered." He reached across the table, taking my hand. His was warm, familiar. "I know, and I am so sorry. It was stupid, a drunken, idiotic mistake. It meant nothing. You mean everything to me, Sarah. You have to know that." His words, which once would have melted my resolve, now felt insufficient. The bed itself was bad enough, Tom, but it was more than that. It was the way you assumed I'd just go along with it. The way you didn't even see me, my feelings, in that moment. He squeezed my hand. "I see you now, Sarah. I really do. And I'm scared of losing you." There it was, the fear. It was honest, raw, and it touched me despite everything. "I'm not going anywhere, Tom," I said, and it was true in a literal sense. I wasn't packing my bags, but something had irrevocably changed. But we can't just go back to how things were. "I don't want to go back," he insisted. "I want to go forward. Better. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy? A trip, just the two of us? You name it." I pulled my hand gently from his. "I appreciate that, Tom. And maybe we can explore some of those things. But I need some time. Some space to think." His face fell a little, but he nodded. "Okay. Time. I can give you time." The following week, I bumped into Mark at the local bookstore. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was browsing the new releases, enjoying a rare quiet moment to myself. I turned a corner, and there he was, engrossed in a photography book. "Mark," I said, surprised. He looked up, his face lighting up with a genuine smile when he saw me. "Sarah, hi. What a nice surprise." "You too," I replied, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through me. "I didn't know you were a photography buff." "Among other things, he chuckled, just admiring the art. How have you been? His gaze was kind, searching, but not intrusive. I've been okay, I said truthfully. Thinking a lot. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Me too. An easy silence fell between us, not awkward, just comfortable. It was as if we could communicate without needing a lot of words. That dinner. I began, then hesitated. It was a good night, he finished for me, his smile softening. For a good cause. Yes, I agreed. It was. I paused, then decided to be bold. Mark, would you be interested in getting a coffee sometime? Just to talk. As friends. I emphasized the last two words, perhaps more for my own benefit than his. His eyes met mine, and there was that flicker again. That unreadable something. I'd like that very much, Sarah, he said. As friends. We exchanged numbers. Our own this time, not filtered through Tom. It felt like a small step, but a significant one. A step towards... what? I wasn't sure. A friendship, certainly. But there was an undercurrent, a quiet hum of possibility that both intrigued and unsettled me. Later that week, Mark and I met for coffee. We sat in a sunny corner of a small cafe, the aroma of roasted beans and fresh pastries enveloping us. We talked for almost 2 hours. We talked about books, about our families. He had a sister in Oregon he was very close to, about our dreams, the ones we'd achieved, and the ones we'd let go of. He told me about his late wife, who had passed away from cancer 5 years prior. He spoke of her with love and a quiet sadness that was deeply moving. It was the first time he'd really opened up about her to me, or perhaps to anyone outside his closest circle. And I found myself talking too, sharing things I hadn't shared with anyone in years, not even Tom. I talked about my own unfulfilled ambitions, the novel I'd always wanted to write, the art classes I'd always meant to take. He listened, truly listened, offering thoughtful comments and gentle encouragement. There was no flirting, no innuendo, no crossing of lines. It was just a connection, a meeting of minds, of spirits. And it was profoundly comforting. I realized how lonely I had been, even in my marriage. Tom and I lived together, shared a bed, a life, but we didn't often connect on this deeper level anymore. The easy intimacy, the shared vulnerability. Those had faded over time, replaced by routine and unspoken resentments. As we were leaving the cafe, Mark paused at the door. Sarah, he said, his expression earnest. I value this. Our conversation. Your friendship. Me too, Mark, I replied, meeting his gaze. More than you know. Walking home, I felt lighter than I had in ages. The confusion was still there, the uncertainty about my marriage, about the future. But alongside it, there was a new sense of hope, of possibility. The unexpected wager had thrown my life into disarray, yes, but it had also opened up a space for something new, something unexpected. A friendship that was nourishing my soul. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was showing me a path towards rediscovering not just myself, but what I truly needed in all my relationships. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was an active participant in it, not just a passenger. And that made all the difference. The coffee with Mark became a semi-regular thing. Once every week or two, we'd find an hour or so to meet, to talk. Sometimes it was a quick chat over a latte, other times a longer stroll through the park if the weather was nice. Tom knew about it. I told him, keeping things transparent. Mark and I are having coffee, I'd say, matter-of-factly. He didn't like it, I could tell. His jaw would tighten, a muscle twitching near his eye. But he didn't forbid it. He knew he wasn't in a position to make demands. He was still in the doghouse, as they say, and trying, in his own clumsy way, to make amends. He'd started suggesting date nights for us again, something we hadn't done regularly in years. He'd book a table at a new restaurant or get tickets for a show. Sometimes they were enjoyable. We'd laugh, we'd talk, and for a few hours it would almost feel like the old days, before the comfortable silences had turned into distant ones. But then we'd go home, and the underlying tension would resurface. The elephant in the room, that poker game, the wager, the shift it had caused in me, was always there. One evening, after a particularly strained dinner where Tom had tried a little too hard to be charming, and I had felt a little too detached, he finally confronted me more directly. We were in the living room, the television off for once. "Sarah," he began, his voice quiet, hesitant. "These coffees with Mark, what's going on? Really?" I sighed, setting down the book I'd been pretending to read. "We talk, Tom. He's a good listener. He's a friend." "I'm your husband," he said, a note of pain in his voice. "You should be talking to me like that." "I try, Tom," I said, and I had. "But for a long time now, it's felt like you weren't really listening. Or maybe I wasn't really talking about the things that mattered. Not anymore." I looked at him, trying to be honest, not accusatory. "That night when you made that bet, it wasn't just about the bet, Tom. It was a symptom of something bigger, of how disconnected we've become." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well. "So Mark is—" "What? Filling a void?" "Maybe," I admitted. "Maybe he's reminding me of what it feels like to be heard. To be seen as an individual, not just as part of a pair or someone's wife." The words hung in the air between us. They were harsh, but they were true. Tom looked down at his hands. "I don't want to lose you, Sarah," he whispered. "I love you. I know I haven't been the best husband lately, or maybe for a long time. But I'm willing to work on it. On us." "I know you are, Tom," I said gently, and I believed he was trying, in his way. But the question was, could we find our way back to what we once had? Or, more importantly, could we build something new, something stronger, from the pieces of what had broken? My friendship with Mark continued to be a quiet anchor in this period of uncertainty. There was never any physical intimacy beyond a friendly hug when we met or parted. No romantic declarations. But the emotional intimacy was undeniable. He understood my turmoil without me having to spell it out. He offered perspective, not advice. He listened without judgment. One afternoon, as we were walking by the river, he said, "You seem a little brighter today, Sarah." I smiled. "I am, actually. Tom and I had a long talk last night. A real talk. It wasn't easy, but it felt productive." "That's good," he said, his gaze warm. "Whatever path you choose, Sarah, I hope it leads you to happiness. You deserve that." His words, so simple, so sincere, touched me deeply. "Thank you, Mark. That means a lot. Your friendship has meant a lot." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Yours too, Sarah. More than you can imagine." There was an intensity in his eyes, a depth of feeling that went beyond simple friendship, but it wasn't demanding, it wasn't pressuring. It was just there. A quiet acknowledgement of a bond that had formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. I realized then that the "you won't believe what happened" part of this story wasn't about some scandalous affair or a dramatic marital breakdown. It was about the quiet revolution that had taken place within me. It was about finding an unexpected connection that had, in turn, helped me reconnect with myself and begin to honestly assess my marriage. The original wager, Tom's drunken act of foolishness, had been the catalyst. But what happened next was a series of choices, made by me, by Mark, and even by Tom as he began to confront his own failings. In the weeks and months that followed, Tom and I did start therapy. It was hard. There were tears and angry words and painful silences. We had to unearth years of unspoken resentments, of needs unmet, of paths diverged. But slowly, painstakingly, we began to communicate again, to listen, to try and understand each other, not as we once were, but as we were now. My coffees with Mark became less frequent, not because of any dictate from Tom, but because I was investing more energy into my marriage, into the difficult work of rebuilding. Mark understood. There was no awkwardness, no resentment. Our friendship had served a purpose, a vital one, and now it was settling into a different rhythm, still there, still valued, but no longer the primary source of my emotional support. There was no miraculous, overnight transformation in my marriage, but there was progress, small steps, a shared laugh that felt genuine, a thoughtful gesture from Tom that wasn't prompted by guilt, a willingness on both our parts to be vulnerable. One evening, months after that fateful poker game, Tom and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was quiet, peaceful. "You know," Tom said, reaching for my hand, his touch gentle, tentative, "I'm still an idiot sometimes." I smiled. "Sometimes," I agreed. "But I'm a lucky idiot," he continued, his eyes meeting mine. "Lucky that you're patient. Lucky that you were willing to give us another chance. To give me another chance. It wasn't just about giving you a chance, Tom," I said, squeezing his hand. "It was about giving myself a chance to figure out what I wanted, what I needed, and to ask for it." The experience with Mark, the unexpected depth of our connection, had taught me the importance of being seen, of being heard. It had given me the courage to seek that within my own marriage, to demand more, not in a combative way, but in a way that honored my own worth. I don't know what the future holds for Tom and me. Rebuilding trust, rebuilding intimacy, it's a long road. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. And I know that whatever happens, I'm stronger, more self-aware. And Mark, he remains a dear friend, a friend who, through an absurd, drunken bet, inadvertently helped me find my way back to myself. Sometimes life's most profound lessons come from the most unexpected quarters. My drunk husband lost me in cards to his best friend, and what happened was that I started to find myself again. And that, I think, is something worth believing in.